put your microphone on? It's a clip.
I was thinking of just like holding it like this.
If you want, but don't put it too close to your mouth.
Yeah, because then it's gonna.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Vinchenanapalooza podcast. Today, we will be examining Sylvia Plath's The Bell Jar. But before we get started, a word from our sponsor. I can't find the book that I need.
Did you just say you can't find the book that you need? Well, I have the perfect website for you.
Heisenbooks is a virtual bookstore that provides audiobooks and real hardcover books delivered right to your doorstep. Heisenbooks provides a variety of different genres, categories, and authors. Anything you can think of, Heisenbooks has.
Visit Heisenbooks today and use code VNANA for 50% off your first purchase.
And a free audiobook.
Now back to today's episode.
So, The Bell Jar is this sappy, almost depressing book describing Esther Greenwood's delve into challenging societal norms and finding her place in the world. Whether you're a diehard Plath fan, or you're just picking up because it's a classic, or you have to read it for school, it does create a really engaging discussion.
Right, I feel like the way that the book is perceived is really up to the interpreter. Like, personally, I related to Esther a lot, and the pressure that was, like, put on her by her peers. Honestly, I didn't really like the book, though. Like, pretty bad. But I could relate to Esther on, like, a personal level, so.
Like, starting the book was pretty hard. Like, it was a hard read, a slow read in the beginning. But, like, once you get past a few chapters, it starts kind of, like, picking up, and then you start really feeling more engaged. And you start, like you said, relating to the characters on a personal level. So can you just, like, give us a quick rundown for some people who may not have read the book?
Yeah, for sure. So the novel is set in the 1950s, and it opens up in a New York hotel for women. And throughout the book, though, the setting does change. It goes to, like, multiple asylums and, like, her mother's house and, like, her hometown for a little bit. Our main character is obviously Esther Greenwood, who I found to be very pessimistic and depressing, so.
That's true, but she was also, like, really perceptive, and she has, like, such a deep character, and she was pretty turbulent, and I feel like she was written this way to really demonstrate just, like, how, like, non-conformative she was, especially for a young woman in the 1950s, because these are all just, like, character traits of someone who just doesn't fit in, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like, you know, like, our theme, which would be societal pressure, mental health, gender norms, it really does, like convey those themes, especially as, like, a literary analysis, like, in a literary analysis way. Like, you can really show, like, you can really see the type of effects that it has on Esther when she doesn't conform.
Mm-hmm. That's really, like, the main topic around the whole book, is that she just doesn't really fit in. You know, I think conform is the right word, because fit in makes it sound like you don't belong.
Yeah, definitely.
And, like, yeah, her mental health is a huge factor in the story. Like you said, she went through multiple asylums, and those do call attention to other, like, topics or themes, such as, like, the restrictive nature of society and just, like, the rules she has to conform to.
Yeah, and she definitely does struggle with identity, because we know her friend Doreen, who was with Lenny in the beginning of the book, we know that she kind of felt left out and, like, almost jealous in a way. So yeah. Moving on to Act 2, Plath does use a lot of, like, literary devices, obviously the bell jar being probably the biggest one, but another being virginity, purity, of course. I chose Esther Greenwood. What literary device did you use?
I chose Buddy Willard.
Oh, okay. So how did you think, like, societal norms, like, impacted Buddy?
So, Buddy, throughout the story, we could see, like, as a man, he didn't really have as many restrictions as, say, Esther.
Yeah.
Sorry, as Esther. And even some of those restrictions, like, aren't even societal. They're just restrictions that she believes that she should have on herself. Like, Buddy, like you said, virginity, Esther was saving herself for him, and he just didn't really put much thought into it, thought it was just something he could just give away, you know? So, if Esther did that, she, like, the reason she didn't is because she thought, like, she would be, like, shamed for it, like, she was ashamed of herself if she did it, but he didn't. you know?
Yeah, like he thought it was something to brag about almost. I remember reading a quote. If I look at my notes here, I think there should be one. No. But I remember like a part in the book. I don't really know the page or the the quotation for it, but I remember like her telling her seniors about that in the book, like the fact that he had slept with another woman multiple times after she saved herself for him, and then they proceeded to tell her, well, that's just what guys do. You have to expect it.
Like
Most guys are.
people.
Yeah. And again, like, I think that the societal construct, like, of being a set role because of your gender definitely went both ways. Like, I feel like Buddy, like, I remember when he had tuberculosis, his dad was almost ashamed of him because he was sick. Because it was shown as weak, and men couldn't be weak in the 1950s or even nowadays.
Yeah, and obviously there are, like, societal expectations for both genders. Like, as you can see, Esther was held to this high level of purity. Like, you have to stay pure for your man. Like, he's the head of the household. You have to serve him. And guys were kind of seen to be, like, the provider. And, like, if he was sick, like you said, it's a sign of weakness. Like, he can't provide. He's being provided for. So that would also be shameful for him.
Yeah.
But because of this, being, like, seen as the head of the household, that kind of gave men in general, like, almost this ego, thinking, like, oh, well, if I'm the head of the household, I could tell women what to do, because, like, they're seen as below them. And one of the quotes I saw, it was on page 93, Esther was visiting Buddy in his, like, hospital room, because he was really sick with tuberculosis, and even then, even in that deteriorated state, she was talking about how she doesn't want to get married, and Buddy is kind of like saying, oh, you're crazy. Like it says right here,
Yeah.
You're crazy, Buddy Brightens. You'll change your mind. And she said, no, my mind's made up. But Buddy just went on looking cheerful. So even after she confirmed twice that her mind was set, like, these are the rules she wants, she doesn't want to change, he still thinks he has the authority to kind of tell her that she's wrong about herself. So,
Definitely, yeah.
like you said, both genders have their own restrictions, but, like, you don't really see women.
You don't see women ordering around men like that. Like you're crazy.
They're more restricted.
Yeah. But
like, especially today, you can see it everywhere.
Of course. So, going off of what you said, we know that Esther, like, challenges societal norms in an extremist way, where in one quote she says on Plath 83, the last thing I wanted was infinite security and to be the place an arrow shoots off from, which we know was a direct quote from Mrs. Williard, Buddy's mother, who was very internalized. And we know that Esther talks about her in an almost high way, but, like, in a way that she feels bad for her, where she says, this seemed a dreary and wasted life for a girl with 15 years of straight A's, but I knew that's what marriage was like, Plath 84. So it's obviously internalized that marriage is something that, like, is restrictive upon women, and we know that, like, not speaking in novel context, but speaking in just general context, that a lot of men in the 1950s often cheated on their wives. So it's just, like, where a woman has to be tied down to their man, and, like, they have to stay home and cook after they've gone to college and done this. And we know that expectations for women were a lot higher than they were for men, where we know that Esther wanted to be a journalist, and she her mother constantly pushed on her that she needed to learn all these languages, take all these courses, and it made her depressed because she was finding the fact that nonconformity was harder than conformity, but she still doesn't want to conform. So it leaves her, like, nowhere to go, and she literally goes into a state of depression because of this, where she almost kills herself. Like, she doesn't sleep for weeks and she doesn't shower for weeks. So that's literally, like, shows the effects that nonconformity has on women, because there's just nowhere to go. So gender norms took control of literally every aspect, including intimate and romantic. So women, as we said before, were expected to save themselves for their husband, but men, where we know Buddy Williard was allowed to sleep around with some co-worker of his over the summer multiple times. And still today, I feel like it's like a expectation that men are more allowed to do that than women are. So, I don't know. I just thought that was really interesting how that's just so accurate.
I don't think it's really like guys are more allowed to. It's more just like when it happens, no one really bats an eye.
Yeah.
Like it's just boys will be boys. Like people still say guys shouldn't cheat, but when that actually happens, who really stops them?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. We know that like sex scares Esther honestly as well because she was scared to do it and she wanted to make sure that it was right, but like even in this sense, she still got back at Buddy for it. And the irony of the situation was that she had to go to the hospital because I think she had a hemorrhage or something, right? Yeah, so I don't know. I just thought there was like a beauty of that situation where she was trying to save herself from him and then she went into this big revenge.
And one thing I want to add on that, as you were saying, she was kind of like scared of it. So the fact that she lived her whole life like remaining pure in a sense just for Buddy, and the moment Buddy kind of like turned away from her, she like you could see like how her mental health was so deteriorated that this thing that she was holding so dearly for years and years was all of a sudden just like
gone,
worthless.
Yeah, worthless.
Like it's not important anymore, and she just wanted revenge.
Yeah, so like virginity metaphorically I feel like is characterized by a lot of things, and like one being innocence and purity for sure. Like it is seen as dirty to be like to have had been sexually promiscuous with multiple people as a woman in the 1950s. They were held to a standard, they were held to a standard in which they needed to preserve their virginity and their innocence. And virginity was used as a double standard because men were allowed to sleep around. What would be like the significance of challenging societal norms, do you feel?
Challenging societal norms really highlights the non-conformity in Esther, and like you said, she wants to be a journalist, and she was forced to take all these classes, and non-conformity and challenging norms is kind of like what got her into this whole situation. Not to say that's like her fault, like everyone should, fight the system if they want to. Like that's how you want to live, that should be how you want to live. But it's the fact that by doing this, she kind of like sends herself in a downward spiral because it illustrates how for women back then, you could either conform, become almost like an object for men, and like have the rest of your life planned out, or you could fight for your own life, but then you'd have to fight like all of society, their norms, like people will like look at you like, oh, why aren't you doing the normal thing, the like quote unquote right thing, because that's what people believed was right. So that I lost train of thought, but like you kind of know where I'm getting at, right?
Yeah. I think challenging societal norms is like definitely important because like if we don't, who will? Because like as our generation, or like Esther's generation, which was the younger one specifically, like people wanted to see change and it just wasn't happening. Like even now there's like more and more people who want to do different things, and I think that's really what Esther wanted, but like she was just looked down on for it. But like that's the importance of challenging societal norms, is that anyone can be what they want to be, and there shouldn't be a construct there to restrict you from that. And that's like really why like societal norms are so like
oppressive.
Yeah, they're so oppressive and they're so restricting, and like they can't be a thing because it like limitates people from their actual potential, and that is just not good, of course.
It's like societal norms, like most of the time it's set by the people themselves, so like, it's not really like the government telling everyone women should be this and that, men should be this and that. It's like people doing it to themselves, and only like the people themselves can fight the system that they created.
Of course, yeah. And like people thought she was crazy, moving on to the setting of the asylum. And like even psychologically, the asylums were a whole nother thing in their own, because
for the most part, I feel like asylums made her worse.
Yeah, definitely with Dr. Gordon, I think his name was. Yeah, with Dr. Gordon, we know that her first shock therapy literally traumatized her, and like with her mother, like no fault of her own, like she just wanted to make her daughter feel better. But I think the shock therapy with Dr. Gordon like really showed just the dismissiveness of Esther's nature. Like she just wanted to be different, and she wanted to have a life of her own. But they put her in an asylum because she didn't conform to those norms, which
conforming was seen as normal, and she was
exactly. But like we know, like her first shock therapy was
a disaster,
pretty much, and it basically is like the plot almost, or the subplot of the book is the shock therapy thing, because her shock therapy with Dr. Nolan, I think the name was Dr. Nolan. Yeah,
that's the second doctor.
Yeah, the second doctor.
Yeah.
She liked it. She was okay, and she was better after that. So yeah. How do you think like Esther's character, like why do you think Plath depicted Esther the way that she did?
I thought we did this question.
Yeah, just a small section, like the author depict. Like, do you see where it says like this part? This next line.
Is it above that?
It's in purple, I think.
I think instead of saying that, I'm going to say like...
Yeah, you can rephrase it however you want.
She was depicted this way because the goal of an author is to write a story that the audience will somewhat relate to, and more often than not, like, they want to write a story for the audience to relate to, and by writing Esther Greenwood as this very descriptive character, it can almost make you feel like you are Esther Greenwood. Like how throughout the story, whenever something happened, you'd feel like it happened to you because you're so invested, something like that.
Okay.
So
yeah. So just a quick little segment before we get into the conclusion. Why do you think Plath depicted Esther the way that she did?
So Plath, she's an author, and the main goal of an author is to write a story for the audience to enjoy for a multitude of reasons, one of which, like, feeling like you're really in the story, you're in the protagonist's shoes. And I believe she did a really good job, because throughout the story, whenever something happened, like, to Esther, it would feel like it happened to you personally, because she's really trying to make you feel like you're just another cog in the machine, the way Esther was feeling. It wants to make you feel frustrated, like when it was broken. So it's like, oh, Buddy just slept with someone else. Like, she wrote it in a way so
fuming.
Yeah, so like that means she's doing her job correctly. Like, she wants you to get mad when Esther gets mad, sad when she gets sad. And the way she was written really like emphasizes just how much non-conformity was important, and just how big conformity was back then, and it still is today.
Yeah, for sure. Also, like, it really taps into your empathy. Like, you really feel for Esther. Okay, so actually, the final act, the conclusion. Plath's book indubitably delves into the psychological effects social norms have on both genders, and I think it's very important to the message it provides. How not just gender norms, but all social expectations put a restriction on us all.
So, yeah, like I said earlier, I was a little mistaken when I said it's not really the government that sets up these norms. For example, something that was really popular, which kind of died out, is Roe v. Wade, and how a set of almost all men kind of like made laws like governing how women treated their bodies, because they still have this ego that I talked about.
But do you think that's because it's just internalized, or because it's just like it's the government? Like, it's not really the government, it's just really internalized. They've been raised like that since they were children.
Even though it's the government, it's still the people in the government.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, they were still raised like that. So,
that would be internalized, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The theme of the book can definitely be applicable to the real world, like you said, Roe v. Wade. The theme literally is social bondage against men and women, and like, we are going backwards, and women do not have rights to their bodies because of that law in some states in America.
that brings up another interesting point. So, that brings up another interesting point, talking about Roe v. Wade. Men are starting to kind of say, like, it's unfair that we have to be seen as the head of the household, and people are like, oh, I'm just the wallet in the relationship, and they're kind of like complaining that they have to be the quote-unquote provider, even though that's what they fought for back then. Like, they wanted to be the provider, and now they're kind of like realizing that it's unfair to be the one that has to provide for everything, and they're starting to try to like fight that. And it's kind of showing how like people are their own undoing. Like, people are the ones setting up these societal norms. Men are the ones that set up these norms that they don't like anymore, and they're the ones that are starting to like be non-conformative to their own rules. And it's kind of ironic how back then women were not conforming to the rules that the men set up, and now it's the men not conforming to the rules that they set up themselves.
Yeah. The moral is, if we do not challenge societal norms as society progresses, it will progressively get worse. So it is indefinitely important to challenge them, because if we don't, who will? And with that, my friends, is the Vinchenanapalooza podcast. Thank you for watching. See you on the flip side.
You ready?
Oh, let me get the book.
I know. Not my line.
It's gonna be a lot of bloopers.
Thanks.
Thank you. So, stop it! Come here, burp into the mic loud.